All right, everyone. I would like to officially welcome you to the Mcmullen Area GSA's 2022 Vision event. Before we officially begin, I'd like to go over a few Zoom logistical items with you. If you're in need of Spanish translation today, we have a wonderful interpreter here with us. To listen to the presentation in Spanish, simply click the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish, and you will enter into the translation room. Additionally, if you have any technical difficulties, please send a message in the chat and we will respond as quickly as possible. Also, throughout the entire event today, feel free to submit questions through the Q&A feature, also at the bottom of your screen. At the end of today's Vision event, our panelists will be answering your questions. So again, at any point throughout the event, feel free to submit those and we will get through as many as possible. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our fearless leader, Matt Hurley, to introduce our MAGSA team.
Thank you, Ashley. And some of you may notice that Ashley is relatively new and we're happy to have her aboard. She is a rock star communication specialist. I think you'll like her a lot. So we'll get to see more of her as the day goes by. The rock star team that we have assembled today for you. First, we have Lynn Groundwater Moeller, who comes from Provost and Pritchard. She is our author of our groundwater sustainability plan and continues to be our lead principal engineer on the design work for most of our projects in Mcmullen. We also have Randy Hopkins, another principal engineer from Provost and Pritchard. Randy's been around for some time. He's not as old as me, but he's experienced, so that's a good thing for us. And last but not least, we will have Terry Erlewein. I think he's in the process of joining us. Terry is also an engineer with Provost and Pritchard, but had some time in his career with the State Water Project. From Tetra Tech, we have David Monroe. Tetra Tech is involved in doing our environmental review, both CEQA and NEPA. He'll go over some of that. And then last but not least, certainly from Bichond and Associates, we have Dr. Philip Bichond, who's doing our watershed plans and is sort of a local legend in the on-farm recharge world, and he'll be going over some of that. So those are the folks you'll be hearing from today. We're going to move fairly quickly. I will start off by looking backwards a little bit. This is our second Vision event. Last year, just about this time, within a day or so, we were taking a look at 2021, and we're looking forward favorably towards it, and very hopeful at that point for successes in 3 identified areas. First was the data gathering area. That area, is critical to us because MAGSA has started off without a whole lot of data to support its operations, and so we're going to need to collect as much verifiable information as we possibly can. We identified the 23 representative monitoring wells that needed to be metered, and we got those underway, and we're just completing the installation of those. We hired a data management company to compile that information for us and sort it out so we can make good use of it. We also spent some time on rules and regulations and policies at MAGSA, and we've put those up on our website, and we've got those pretty well in hand. And most importantly, we have adopted a policy relative to metering and measurement, and we've also adopted rules and regulations that kind of specify how we would like everybody to help us in that pursuit. As you can see there in the dark, don't read that yet because it spoils the rest of the presentation a little later on, but we do have well registration underway. We estimate ahead of time, because we didn't know for sure, that we had somewhere between 950 and 1,050 wells in MAGSA, and we're making great progress towards identifying all those and getting those mapped and laid out in our analysis. Last but not least, we have adopted a policy that has everyone in MAGSA prepared to put meters on their wells by 2025, hopefully sooner than that. And we will begin that process very soon, now that we have the wells well along on registration. Another item was our water marketing plan. The water marketing was merely a thought at that point. We had a marketing analysis being done by our consultants that we had hired with our Bureau of Reclamation grant, and they were moving forward with workshops and studies relative to the best method that they could recommend for us as far as a groundwater marketing plan within MAGSA for the future. We've completed that study, that analysis now, and there's an actual water market report that's available on our website. You can see it there, www.mcmullenarea.org /water marketing. And you can take a look at that and see the recommendations for water marketing. Of course, we can't do water marketing really without the prerequisite of having meters and data collection so that we can keep track of all the marketing and sales that might go on. So we expect that to occur probably sometime perhaps late next year, but we're all ready for it as a result of completing that report on time. Last, and probably most importantly, is the Aquaterra water bank. Again, we'll hear a little bit more about that very soon, and we'll give you some details on that. But the Aquaterra water bank was essentially a concept, a fairly well-developed concept a year ago, but now happy to report that we've cleared 2021. We've gone forward with some environmental scoping, and we expect that we'll be hitting the ground running on the Aquaterra water bank, which we'll talk about a little bit later today. So bottom line, 2021, a rousing success. And we're going to move forward at the same pace, if not a little faster, for 2022. So again, the word for me is hopeful, and we're going to keep the pedal to the metal as we go forward. First and foremost, though, we have to talk about getting our GSP in a good stead with the Department of Water Resources. And here to talk about that and the upcoming GSP tune-up review is Lynn Groundwater.
Thank you, Matt. So I will give a brief overview of SGMA, what's timeline of deadlines, a review of the GSP, and later Randy will cover what we can expect from DWR GSP comments. So to recap on SGMA, so far we have established the GSAs in 2017, and the GSAs submitted their GSPs in January of 2020. Once the GSPs were submitted to DWR, they have 2 years to comment on the plans. So since they were submitted in January of 2020, DWR will be releasing the comments at the end of the month. We're already at the end of the month, so they only have a couple days left, but they'll be released by January 31st. Once we receive those comments and they are released, we will have 180 days to address those comments and update the GSP and submit it back to DWR. In the meantime, once the GSPs were submitted in 2020, we have been preparing annual reports that are due April 1st of every year, and they go over the basin conditions as well as progress towards implementing the plan. In addition to the annual reports, there's also 5-year updates. So as we gather more information and data, the plans will be updated, and will also give an assessment of implementation and meeting the sustainability goal of the basin. With the ultimate goal is to achieve sustainability by 2040. So next I'll provide a summary of a couple maps and also what the GSP does and doesn't do. So the first one is a map of the Kings Basin, and MAGSA is one of 7 GSAs within the Kings subbasin. The other GSAs include North Kings, Central Kings, South Kings, Kings River East, North Fork Kings, and James ID. MAGSA is located on the western edge of the Kings subbasin and is shown in dark purple, and is located entirely in Fresno County. And next we'll take a closer look at MAGSA. So within MAGSA, there are 6 agencies located within the GSA. There are 2 ecological reserves located along Highway 180, which includes the Alkali Sink and Kerman, which are shown in orange in the map. Then there's Mid-Valley Water District, which is located along the western edge of MAGSA, which is shown in the gray hatch. And Raisin City Water District is the southeast portion of the GSA, shown with the blue hatch. Within Raisin City Water District, there's the community of Raisin City, shown in green. And the last agency is Fresno County, which covers not only all of MAGSA, but also the white areas that aren't represented by either water districts. So next, let's talk a little bit about what the GSP does. So the GSP documents historic and current conditions within the GSA that include groundwater levels, groundwater quality, land subsidence, groundwater storage, and water budgets, just to name a couple. The GSP also defines the path forward. The GSP defines the measurable objectives and minimum thresholds for the sustainability indicators. These indicators are set to avoid causing undesirable results. The potential projects and management actions are used to address problems, respond to changing conditions, and help achieve sustainability. Now, what the GSP does not do, GSP does not require immediate pumping restrictions, require changes to crops, require land use changes, or require mandatory fallowing. And you may have heard Matt say a few times that we have two knobs. We have a demand knob and a supply knob. The initial focus of MAGSA is the supply knob. The projects are going to bring surface water into MAGSA to help correct the overdraft. There are several projects identified in the GSP and that MAGSA is working to implement. The projects the projects are focused on bringing supply into the GSA before we start focusing on the demand knob, or in other words, the management actions. And next, we'll hand it over to Randy Hopkins to discuss what we can expect from the DWR GSP conference.
So earlier this year, DWR has had 2 years to provide comments to us on the plans, and they've been slowly, have you seen in some of the press releases, have been slowly getting those comments out. We're probably the last, or one of the last groups to get our comments, but what we're expecting is based on a letter we received from the state board. You kind of put these in broad categories, but what they seem to be looking for was consistency among all the Kings Basin GSPs and how certain things were handled, approaches to minimum thresholds, measurable objectives, and et cetera. That the groundwater levels, everybody had a kind of a common way of looking at those. Same thing with groundwater quality. They want a little bit more data from us and information about interconnected surface water, especially along the San Joaquin River. For a little bit more definition to our projects and management actions. In a discussion, they did cite water rights and how that all would work on some of these projects and management actions to make them feasible. And I wanted to see a little bit more, hear a little bit more about how we engaged with the public during the process, which we did have quite often had the public at a lot of meetings, engaged with people, had Fresno State. Matt had Fresno State go out and meet with folks in the rural residential areas too. So, but we are preparing and expecting that letter no later than Monday. And the steps to address the comments. Once we get DWR's final comments, we expect they'll take all the state board's comments, but they may not. So we need to go through those as a team, coordinate. There'll be some of those that'll be dealt with at the sub-base or at the basin level. So Kings GSA managers will work through and determine how they want to handle some of those coordinated items. Everything, just like we did with the GSP, we're going to work with our technical advisory committee and stakeholder committees, engage in a very, very clear way with all the stakeholders within the GSA. Take into account all of that feedback, all that information, look at what DWR is asking for, and update our GSP and resubmit within the next 6 months.
Okay, I'm back. accelerating the process towards sustainability. There's a couple of things that really tie back into what Randy was just talking about in terms of the Department of Water Resources interest in our getting our coordination going with the rest of the folks in our subbasin. One of those is to come up with better information about exactly where the water elevations are in each of the wells, but also a better handle on the total quantity of water that gets extracted on an annual basis within the subbasin. So again, going back to the well registration, revisiting that with a little more detail, we need to start by identifying where the wells are so that we can make sure we get them all metered up, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But back in October, the MAGSA board adopted a policy and implementing regulations about well metering, monitoring, and construction for the well owners. And part of that was that we needed to have a registration, and we needed to have it fairly soon. So we took a huge leap of faith, and as usual, our landowners came through. On November 1st, we sent out a general request to our landowners to please register all of their well locations, both active, inactive, and even those that they considered to be temporarily abandoned because they weren't being put into use in the near future. And they identified those for us. And again, I said in the beginning, we thought, based upon some information we received about well completion reports over the last 60 or 70 years and some anecdotal data, we thought that we would expect somewhere between 950 and 1,050 total wells within MAGSA of all the categories, active and inactive, et cetera. And that doesn't even include the domestic wells. And we were hopeful. You start off on one of those things, it's kind of like voting day, right? If you can get 30 or 40 or 50%, you'll be thrilled. Well, as it says right there in the middle of the picture, 90% of the wells in MAGSA we presume have been registered. And that's probably just almost an unbelievable, if not phenomenal response. And I cannot tell you how much this staff and myself are appreciative of that. That will allow us to really accelerate the ability to organize and begin to assess where we need to go forward for MAGSA. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And at the bottom down there, there's a little thing that says, if you haven't, for some reason, you're on vacation or you didn't get the mail or whatever, what we've done is because of the fact that we have such a small amount remaining, we've gone ahead and increased the grace period through March 1st. You probably will be receiving again, even the ones who have already registered, but you'll get a thank you from me in the mail. And for those who haven't, you'll get a reminder that you do have a little bit more grace period to get those in, so we can get as close as possible to 100% registered. That would just be unbelievable if we could do that. Now, what does that mean? Will we come out and hit somebody over the head, or will we charge them a whole bunch of money or put fines on them? No. Really, what we've decided to do at this point, since we've had such a positive reaction and we want to stay away from penalties as much as possible, we will need to cut off on March 1st for anybody who has not registered their well, the ability to participate in what we expect to be a fairly robust incentive and rebate program for helping landowners to defer the cost of the capital improvements, which will be a magnetic meter and some telemetry on their wells and some ongoing monitoring. So please, if you haven't done so already and you're watching this presentation, or if you get something in the mail that reminds you and you haven't got them all registered, you'll have some time. Go on the website at www.mcmullenarea.org/well registration. Fill out the form there and submit it online, or print one down and fill it out longhand and submit it to us. It's just really important for management of the groundwater to know where all of our wells are. Each of the new wells that comes from the county, we get notified of, and I have the ability to communicate with the well driller, and we're getting great cooperation again, also from our well drillers as they make sure they register those new wells as they come online as well. So tremendous cooperation, tremendous results. Next up for us is metering, but that can come over the next couple of years, and we have absolute confidence that our landowners are going to be getting metered as soon as possible. I would encourage you to be part of the acceleration by getting a hold of your of your equipment dealers and talking to them about availability of magnetic meters and getting those ordered up, because they aren't an item that necessarily sits on a shelf, so they'll have to get those ordered up for you. But please begin to the extent possible putting meters on your wells over the next couple of years, and we will provide those incentives for you just as soon as we verify some of our grant monies and so forth, and we get a full idea of what those monies are. So again, stay in the loop, get on the Mcmullen area website, get on the email list, and stay with us as we start to talk about really getting an idea about just how much groundwater we're pumping. It's critically important to us. We have to be able to defend our number, and the way you do that is have good data and good machinery to do that. So we're going to be counting on landowners to do the same thing they did with well registrations, get those meters in place as soon as possible so that we can defend our positions and also make ourselves available to a water market so that we can make the most efficient use of the surplus water within MAGSA going forward. So anyway, that's where we are in that. All right, Matt, quit talking about all these silly things. Let's talk about moving the dirt. Next up, we have Dave Monroe from Tetra Tech. He's going to spend a little time with you and talk about the first of our dirt moving projects coming up, and that is our expansion project. David?
Okay, thank you, Matt. So I wanted to tell you a bit about the Mcmullen expansion project, which is shown a bit on the next slide. The Mcmullen expansion project is phase 2 of what we call the Mcmullen projects. Under phase 1, the conveyance structures that you see on the screen right now were constructed to allow water flood flows to be diverted from the Kings River and the James Bypass onto the Terra Nova Ranch, which is a 5,000-acre property that is being used for on-farm recharge. The Mcmullen expansion project is designed to address multiple components that are shown on the next slide. The various purposes and needs for the project include agricultural water management, primarily groundwater recharge, and providing a stable source of groundwater for area users. It is intended to help MAGSA meet its groundwater sustainability plan and to improve groundwater quality, considering legacy practices. One of its primary features is to provide flood damage reduction and to manage river and storm flows that affect downstream disadvantaged communities. Flooding affects disadvantaged communities downstream, and by diverting flood flows onto area lands, the Mcmullen expansion project is expected to help offset those flood flows. The flood flows will be diverted to the project area and allowed to stay on the fields and percolate down into the aquifer to help recharge the aquifer and provide a more stable source of groundwater for irrigators within the MAGSA area. As shown on the next slide, the Mcmullen expansion project is relatively simple. It includes a 12-mile long conveyance canal, 3 pump stations, several road undercrossings, and distribution channels to convey the flood flows out onto approximately 40,000 acres of farmlands. Tetra Tech has assisted MAGSA in preparing the assessment of potential environmental impacts under the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. Our assessment evaluated possible impacts to water quality, hydrology, air quality, noise, transportation, land use, and several other environmental resources. This evaluation identified no significant impacts that would result from the project and includes mitigation measures to reduce the intensity of possible impacts. The CEQA document, which was an initial study, was circulated for public review in late 2021, and we're currently finalizing it. The CEQA document is available for download on the MAGSA website. Later on this spring, we will be releasing the Mcmullen Expansion Watershed Plan EA for which the Natural Resources Conservation Service is the lead agency. So this document, which is being prepared under the National Environmental Policy Act, addresses the federal government's involvement in the Mcmullen expansion project. We'll circulate the Watershed Plan EA later this spring for public review, which will include a 30-day public comment period. The expansion project will offer substantial benefits to the MAGSA area by reducing flood risk and increasing groundwater recharge. Thank you. And Matt, back to you.
If I can get this thing to operate, there we go. Next up, our star project, the Aquaterra Water Bank. And we have the pleasure of having Terry Erlewein here to give us a quick overview on progress so far and how she looks going forward. So Terry, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I'll give a fairly quick once over on water banks and what a water bank is and then what the project is. I think several of you, or many of you have seen some other presentations on this. So don't want to duplicate stuff we've already talked about. So first off, I wanted to just give a little background on what is a water bank. And it's something that's not that common in the Fresno area. The idea is that you would use empty groundwater storage, which is, there's a lot of it underneath MAGSA, about 1.7 million acre feet of empty groundwater storage space. So you would use that and have that tied in with plumbing from other conveyance systems like the California Aqueduct, the Delta Mendota Canal, and then take water that people have, imported water, bank it in the groundwater storage, and then take it out when it's needed. So the idea would be that you'd have participants that would participate in this water bank, and they would pay for the cost of new canals, recharge basins, and wells that are needed to make this groundwater storage or recharge and extraction work. They would put in water supplies that they're bringing to the table from their other supply sources, primarily from the Delta, but various other supply sources that they may have from the State Water Project or Central Valley Project that they get allocations for. And they would store that in MAGSA, in Aquaterra, and get credited for the water that they stored in wet years. And then in dry years, when to the extent that they've stored water already previously, then they could pump that water back and get credit for it and then use that pumped groundwater in their own service areas. So that's what's in it for the project participants. And then the project owner, which is MAGSA, it would be responsible for managing the overall water bank. It would build the new facilities. It would operate them based on the agreements it has with the participants. It could also use the new facilities, the new recharge facilities, primarily new canals and new recharge basins for surplus water recharge whenever that's available, when the participants aren't going to be using it, which is going to be fairly regularly. So this is a new concept for the Fresno area, but it's something that's been in place. These kind of programs have been in place down in Bakersfield with the Kern Water Bank, the Semi-Tropic Water Bank. So next, I wanted to talk a little bit about where how this works and where it's located. Obviously, it's Aquaterra Water Banks located within MAGSA. That's the bottom right-hand side of this figure. And this figure shows at the very upper left-hand corner shows San Luis Reservoir up by Los Banos. And then what would happen is that the participants, water districts primarily from the coastal areas, they would have water from the State Water Project, Central Valley Project at San Luis Reservoir. That water would be moved through the Delta Mendota Canal to Mendota Pool. It would be pumped through these new canals, new pumping plants into new canals, into MAGSA, banked in recharge basins, and then left there in wet years. In dry years, then the project would turn around and the groundwater would be pumped back into Mendota Pool. That would allow the flows that would have been in Delta Mendota Canal to be reduced accordingly, and then that water would be made available. On the bottom right, there's a little information about the scale of what's being proposed. We're talking about 800,000 acre feet of groundwater storage capacity for the water bank, That's out of about 1.7 million acre feet of empty groundwater storage space in MAGSA. And then it would have annual recharge capacity of 208,000 acre feet a year. That's based on about 5 months of recharge use, with the capacity available for other times of the year for surplus water spreading. The instantaneous capacity for the conveyance facilities and spreading facilities would be about 770 CFS. The annual extraction, scheduled extraction, is close to 150,000 acre feet per year. That's based on about 6 months of extraction with 480 CFS of recovery capability. There'd be 2 new facilities that would be developed that would move the water into the project. And those would complement the supplemental facilities that David talked about just a minute ago. And this shows a little bit more about the local configuration of the project. The left-hand figure shows Mendota Pool there, that little light squiggly about in the middle of that left-hand picture, where the San Joaquin River jogs north. And then on the bottom right, it shows the new facilities that are proposed for the Aquaterra. These include the supplemental expansion area that David talked about at the bottom, the little purplish lines. And it shows 2 new conveyance lines that are coming out of Mendota Pool, one that's orange, one that's a little bit higher up on Fresno Slough, little pink line. And those, there'd be pumping plants there at the purple dots. The water would be pumped from Mendota Pool, Fresno Slough, and pumped eastward, and then recharge basins would be then on that eastward alignment of the canal there. So next slide. So just a little bit of background on why would somebody from out of the area be interested in being involved in such a project. The motivation for some of these other contractors is most of them have really limited groundwater storage capacity in their service areas. MAGSA's got about 250,000 acre feet a year of groundwater pumping, and got a groundwater basin, got groundwater storage directly beneath them of more than several million acre feet. Most of these water districts that we're talking with have water use that's maybe somewhat less than MAGSA, but they have groundwater basins that are less, in often cases, less than 100,000 acre feet. So they don't have the kind of access to groundwater storage that you have in MAGSA that really maintains consistent water supplies in dry years. So what in wet years, these other outside contractors, they typically get an allocation of water supply that may be higher than what they can actually use on their own. So they may get an 80% allocation of water supply from the state water project. That's likely to be more than what they can use in that year in their own service area. They don't have a groundwater basin in their own service area they can store that much water in. And so it could help them out a lot to pay for these new facilities in MAGSA and then be able to store the groundwater there. In dry years, then of course they'd want to take the water they'd already put recharged, and that would be limited to what they actually had already been recharged plus whatever losses there are. So the basic fundamental idea is that they can take water from wet years that they have on their supplies and then save it for the dry years when they really need it. Next slide. So the last thing just wanted to briefly cover is where we're at. And as Matt said, we've been having a lot of meetings with participants. Some of the water agencies we're talking about are like agencies in the Santa Clara Valley, also talking with some water districts in Southern California. The initial program has been developed. We have a feasibility study that's drafted, that's near final. We've been talking with potential participants, starting to work on the environmental scoping of the document. the documents. And so at the where we're at now is the middle box here in project implementation. We're starting the environmental permitting, getting ready to do the final design, and then getting ready to execute agreements. The agreements we're talking about, Matt's team has developed some agreements with outside participants that define what their financial obligations are and start to lay the framework for how this project would work. And then those will be updated as the planning progresses and as we move forward. The plan is ambitiously to get the final permitting going in 2023 and begin construction, and then have the project be ready to start a recharge operation at the last of 2023. So that's the quick overview, and I'll turn it back to I think David or Phil. I'm sorry.
I'll jump in there one more time, Terry. They're not tired of hearing me. Well, maybe they are tired of hearing from me. I don't know. Anyway, but I just wanted to kind of review what Terry just said and maybe put it all into perspective in my crazy Matt Hurley way. I mean, up close to 2 million acre feet of potential groundwater storage beneath MAGSA's feet, basically. And to put that in perspective, an empty San Luis reservoir going from empty to full is 2 million acre feet. An empty Pine Flat reservoir from empty to full is 1 million acre feet. An empty Millerton reservoir is about 500,000 acre feet. We're talking about 4 times Millerton, 2 times Pine Flat, and an equal amount of water potentially as the San Luis reservoir to be stored beneath MAGSA's feet. And that just provides tremendous opportunities, not only for MAGSA, but for the Kings Basin and for just the regional, central regional area here with folks around the Mendota Pool, et cetera. So it's just a really, really exciting project. We're making great progress on it. And as you can see up in the corner up there, where's the water coming from? I mean, I think Terry said it, but just to kind of get it all into perspective, that direct recharge will come to us from a number of sources. That might be from the wet year imports by our partners. It could be from flood flows on either the Kings or the San Joaquin. It could come from our basin mates to the east of us if they have surplus water and want to bring it in and put it into the ground. And it could come as a result of some in lieu agreements, means some trades from folks who've otherwise put water in, but then they trade with somebody somewhere else in the state. And then it could come also from potential surplus waters that are available from other people's water rights water that they want to store in here that comes maybe from the Friant Current or from other parts of the CVP system. So there's a lot of water out there. One of the things that's missing, obviously, is that infrastructure that allows us to put the whole thing together. And we believe with some of the existing infrastructure, I saw a question in the Q&A, which was talking about using the San Luis Canal and some of the federal facilities. Yes, the state and federal projects both share the San Luis Reservoir. They share the O'Neill Forebay. The Delta Mendota Canal conveys, a lot of federal water. The San Luis Canal conveys a lot of state water. And using those existing facilities in addition to the Friant Current and the San Joaquin and the Kings provides us a great source from which to draw this water for not only for ourselves and for MAGSA landowners, which is very important, but we believe will allow us enough leave behind, which is part of a water banking process in the ground, to go a long way, if not all the way, towards reaching sustainability for the entire Kings Subbasin. So very, very exciting and very, very important stuff. On-farm recharge, I mentioned at the beginning. I'll segue to Phil on that, because it can't all be MAGSA personnel and people putting this water in the ground. We're going to rely on our landowners to do that. And we've come up with a way to make sure that we have the smartest landowners on the planet when it comes to on-farm recharge. And Phil's going to tell you about how that can happen. Phil.
Hi, thanks, Matt. Yes, so I wanted to talk to you about this term that Matt and I came up with, On-Farm Recharge University, OFR University. So like Matt said, we want our landowners to be successful. We want them to have the resources they need. We want them to be the best at implementing on-farm recharge. We want to empower them and enable them to be part of this whole exciting project that we're moving forward on. So most of you are familiar with, I'm sure, are familiar with the Mcmullen project, which David has talked about, but it started with phase 1 that was shown there in the corner down there, just near the James Weir in this slide. And that project has provided some foundational infrastructure, foundational planning tools for on-farm recharge, and the current Mcmullen expansion project is building off of that project, connecting to that infrastructure and utilizing those tools. Our goal is that we would be able to have on-farm recharge implemented across the whole MAGSA area. And so, next slide. So I wanted to come back, on-farm recharge sounds pretty simple. You're putting water on the agricultural field and you're having it infiltrate. There's some key elements to it, and I just wanted to talk about this outreach event that we gave in July of 2021. This is the type of thing that we're planning as part of on-farm, as part of the OFR University, where we're trying to provide people information and value so that they can move forward more successfully. So this presentation talked about a project that we were doing in partnership with UC Cooperative Extension and UC Davis and some landowners. And on this project on pecans, we demonstrated that with good management and good field selection, we could recharge at operationally recharge on a agricultural field up to almost a foot a day. And so that's a rate that's very equivalent to what you could get in a lot of recharge basins. And the advantage of it is it was on actively farmed farmland. So this is the type of thing that we're trying to inform people on and how to make their efforts the most successful they can be. Next slide. So we have some topics and curricula that we're planning as part of OFR University, where we want to talk about the planning and practices behind implementing on-farm recharge. And so those are structural practices, such as has been shown earlier by Lynn with regard to the infrastructure, and it would be infrastructure that's often farm-based, but it could be between farms too, and so things help with conveyance, for flow, for field management, things like that. And then management would be associated with how you're implementing it. So where you select to do it, what crops you select, how you manage your water, how you manage your fertilizers, how you manage your herbicides. And another important part of it would be talking about the conditions that affect on-farm recharge, and those would help you with your management, but also with your, with field selection and things like that. And so, what soils are best, what topography can you work with, what crops are most suitable, things like that. And regional considerations are, the water, what water supply you have when it's coming, as well as climate change considerations and how they link into the whole recharge and available floodwater question. Next slide. So some of the goals, we have operational goals as part of OFR University. We want the effort to be effective. We want it to be efficient. We want it to be cost effective. We want it so that not only MAGSA, but individual landowners are getting the greatest return on their investments. We want to help the area reach sustainable groundwater management, and this is important not only for MAGSA, but it's also important for the whole Kings Basin. And in getting towards there, we're hoping to help agricultural continue to be sustainable in the region. We have some outreach goals as part of this program. We want the material to be informative and useful. We wanted to talk about things that are important to farmers and needed, help with planning, with implementation, discussion of cost. We want this material to be accessible. We want it to be up to date and current. So in the past, we have teamed with UC Cooperative Extension, UC Davis, Fresno State, Department of Water Resources, and we'll continue to team with them and others who are helping move the science and engineering forward in on-farm recharge. We wanted to integrate with other projects. And so, the Aquaterra project is one example of a project that, the expansion project is integrating with. And then we want essentially to broaden the opportunities and inform on the risk associated with this type of program, not only for the region, but also for farmers. Next slide. So back to the Pecan project webinar that we had in July and the work associated with that project. Many useful things came out of it. We talked about cost and practices. We had a handbook that we developed for nut growers, not just pecan growers, but for nut growers, and a white paper that summarizes on-farm recharge and its performance. We also had a crop calendar. And so those are the types of things that we're trying to get out to landowners and farmers in the region. And next slide. And then we want to make it accessible, all this information accessible. So that project was a good example of the type of tools we would use. We had publications with grower magazines. We were published in Pecan South and West Coast Nut and others. We had a webinar that's available online, and we had other publications. And so this is the type of thing that we're hoping to achieve with this On-Farm Recharge University. And I will now send this back to Matt.
Thank you, Phil. Just one extra item for information and education. We've just recently been working with Fresno State University. We're part of their grant to establish some tiered databases associated with crops and soils and so forth. We just got word from another partner of ours, IFF, that will be out and looking to get volunteer farms to come out and do soils testing and irrigation management updates and algorithms for irrigation for total best efficiency and greatest production. And we just made an application literally today for additional dollars that we're hopeful that we'll be able to have our own portable ag labs to go out into the fields and do on-farm analysis that will allow us to fine-tune those efficiencies and fine-tune that ability to use the right amount of water for the right amount of time for the greatest amount of production for our landowners, so we can maximize those efficiencies. So lots and lots of exciting things coming in 2022. Lots of things to stay on the website and stay up to date with. As you can see there on the screen, we have the website, we have an email list, we have a Twitter account, and we have LinkedIn accounts, so that you can always know what's going on in MAGSA, because in 2022 something is always going to be either planned or new, and we're going to continue to chase those efficiencies and those improvements for the MAGSA area as hard as we can, right up and through 2023, and hopefully we'll be back here in 1 year celebrating great successes associated with all these programs as we move them forward. But again, take a look at that. Thank you again for the presentation. I think that's the end of the remarks that we have. We've got about 10 or 12 minutes that we've reserved for some questions. And so I think I'll let Ashley take a look at those questions, and possibly we'll divide them up and get some of our experts to answer them for anybody who might have one. The Q&A is the place to go. Type your question in really quickly and we'll give it our attention. I noticed that there's already 2 down there, and I think I already mentioned the first one. Danielle had asked, per your slide, am I correct in assuming you'll be using infrastructure already in place, such as the aqueduct, to move water from O'Neill 4 Bay to the groundwater recharge? And maybe I can let Terry quickly summarize what those already existing and larger infrastructure parts are in the process. Terry, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, that's right. The plan would be to use the existing infrastructure, or to use available capacity within the existing infrastructure as much as possible. And there'd be some additional conveyance facilities that would be within MAGSA service area, but in great part, it would be relying on existing infrastructure.
At least to bring it to us anyway. Once we
Yeah.
get here, the new infrastructure that we're planning on installing within the MAGSA area, canals, some of those lines on those maps just look like lines, but when you look at them, they're going to be designed to move water at between 300 and 400 cubic feet per second. And on a daily basis, where that looks at 600 to 750 acre feet a day of water moving through a single spot. So fairly robust arterial system, which hopefully will then be able to distribute even further down to the on-farm level. You want me to take the next one too there, Ashley, the one that's up there? All right.
Great.
It says, is there a minimum water block volume for participation in the water bank? If so, what is it? Thanks for answering my question. Right now, just quickly to kind of summarize what Terry had said before, we're looking at a priority. If you can imagine a corporation that has sort of has that priority stock that they would issue. Those are, in exchange for the financial investment of our partners, we're going to reserve the priority, the first priority for about 800,000 acre feet. Now, we have not decided specifically who that combination might be made up of. It could be public agencies, it could be groups of water owners or landowners who want to put their water together to put into our bank. We're not limiting anything at this point. In addition to the 800,000 acre feet of priority, that preferred stock, we will have, as Terry indicated, between 1.2 or 1.5 and up to 1.5 additional a million acre feet of space, and those will be broken down into subsequent tiers. We imagine on some of the other opportunities that we would have to get other partners in, and that could include river water, it could include flood water, it can include those kind of things, and that could be obviously right down potentially to individual landowners. But again, we haven't decided that yet. We're leaving that open, and we're not eliminating anybody from consideration at this point. All right, hopefully that answered the question.
Excellent.
Anybody have any other ones? No such thing as a dumb one. I won't even mention your name, so you don't have to worry about it. Although people can probably see it. I don't know if they can or they can't, but be happy to answer anything else about where MAGSA is going in 2022 and the exciting things that that we have planned for the landowners and MAGSA and the landowners within the Kings Basin. Anybody who's been to one of our webinars before knows that people kind of sit and think about these questions, and they will come. So we sit very patiently, and we give you an opportunity to think about what you might want to ask, and we stand by ready all the way up until 5 o'clock today, 8 more minutes. We stand ready to answer whatever questions you might have. Ah, here we go. Here they come. I knew they were out there. Let's see here. It looks like we have, are they installing meters already? I'm going to guess that question means, are meters being installed already? Part of the questions that we asked as part of our general query on our well registration was whether or not the landowner registering that well had already placed a magnetic meter on there. We asked, who the manufacturer was, what type they were, just to get an idea so that we can provide telemetry to communicate that information back to our database management system. But generally, there's about, at this stage of the game, probably about 10% of the landowners within MAGSA have already provided for some form of electromagnetic meters to be placed on their wells. And I do know, in talking to a number of folks out there, that they're planning on, and they've got orders in, distributors out there, many distributors we have that can sell those meters, and they already have their orders in, and they're awaiting delivery of those those meters and the installation of those meters. So we see a great deal, again, cooperation, not only in registration, but cooperation in beginning to get those meters in place at the earliest possible time. Again, we said 2025 is our policy. That would be a hope that by then we'd all be looking back at least a year's worth of good data from almost 100% participation, even in the metering program by that date. That would be for the stragglers. But I'm expecting, based upon the response we got on the well registration, that once we throw a little bit of incentive in there, a few bucks to knock down the costs of putting on that one-time installation of a meter, that we will see a great deal of participation very soon. Martin, I probably shouldn't have said Martin, but what is your assessment of potential pumping restrictions as a timeline to developing the various storage projects? You know what? This is one that I'm pretty happy to answer. We don't, in our plan and in all of the plans, I think in the Kings Basin, we have a sort of a 10, 20, 30, 40% approach. And for the first 5 years, we've decided that we're going to try to reduce the total overdraft within the entire sub-basin, which we estimate to be about 120,000 acre feet on annual average. We've decided to try to reduce that by 10% in the first 5 years and an additional 20% in the second 5 years. And by and large, the GSAs within the sub-basin are going to be focusing on trying to maximize additional resources like our projects, bringing in additional water, putting that into the ground, doing in lieu recharge, doing exchanges with folks on the outside. So we're hopeful that the necessity of pumping restrictions, unless they're just something about the weather and Mother Nature sneaks up on us, we're hoping that by 2030 we will have gotten a huge bite into the overdraft. And potentially we might not be looking at any type of involuntary pumping restrictions. Some folks are, taking a good hard look at their property uses now, their cropping, et cetera. They're coming to the end of the useful life of some of their orchards. And so they're taking, real good business looks at whether or not they want to continue with the wall-to-wall plantings. But I don't see, honestly, within MAGSA, maybe I'm a Pollyanna, but I don't see the necessity possibly for potential pumping restrictions coming along anytime soon, and hopefully never. So that would be maybe a wishful thinking, but I think that we won't be able to get to that point until about 2030 when we'll be making that final decision. Nothing in the foreseeable future, again, unless unforeseen circumstances jump up. Hopefully that answered the question there. Is there an anticipated start date to the water meter incentive program? Has MAGSA applied for grant funding for this? The answer is yes, we've applied for grant funding. That is in place and we're waiting the results on that. We are hopeful that we can have as much as 50% available funds to match the contributions of landowners toward those new capital improvements. Won't know until we hear back on those grant applications, but we feel pretty positively about the chances to get those dollars into the hopper as quickly as possible. So probably certainly within 2022, hopefully by second quarter of 2022, we will know that, and that's when we'll implement with real numbers the incentive program. We will do rebates. We'll go ahead and do reimbursements. So if you put your meter on early, you won't be missing the incentives. We'll have those retroactive to anybody who puts them on before we put the meter incentive program in place. Bottom line, of course, is we want you to get that meter on as soon as you can, and we're going to do everything within our power to help you get there, including getting that mitigation of that cost down. Does the technical group have any cross sections of the MAGSA aquifers that they could put on the screen tonight? Well, we got about 2 minutes left. I would refer you directly into our groundwater sustainability plan. In that plan, we have several different cross sections of MAGSA and the general MAGSA area. I think you'll find them to be very informative, and they're clearly outlining the fact that MAGSA has beneath its surface kind of the end of the Corcoran clay as it moves east tends to pinch off going just slightly east of MAGSA. And so we have definitely have 2 aquifers below us, whereas several of the agencies to the east of us only have a single unconfined aquifer. But I think you'll find the plan really does lay that out nicely. Also some flows in there if you're interested in flow information. Is this a test, Lori? I'm gonna skip that one and I'll call you back on that one, Lori. I don't think we only got about 30 seconds, so I don't want to go there on that question. Another one is in regards to flow meters, metering flow from wells. Will growers be required to install meters that use wireless to communicate to a base, or will a standard flow meter be sufficient? If wireless, is it the financial responsibility of the grower to have the wireless communications, or is that a MAGSA cost share? At this stage of the game, we're hopeful that the meter will be the near-term purchase requirement for the landowners. We expect to work with our data collections company, data management company, and try to come up with some either MAGSA owned or MAGSA assisted telemetry, which will allow those meters to report real time into a very robust database. We expect that you'll be able to subscribe to a service that will allow you to have a handheld, like a banking application that will be able to give you real-time data on your wells and that production and your remaining allocations, et cetera, as we go forward. Follow-up. Has MAGSA had any discussions with DWR regarding the upcoming airborne EM geophysical surveys that could be conducted over the MAGSA properties? The answer to that is, at this point, we have not. We feel like we have a pretty good understanding what's beneath our feet, and we may or may not participate in the airborne EM geophysical surveys, depending on how things develop. But we haven't gotten a final decision on that yet. And then, last but not least, I have one more. It looks like the last one. If we are using reservoirs, what would be the guidelines for these? Are these eligible for on-farm flood capture if we have any water loss to deep percolations? Reservoirs or recharge facilities, probably recharge facilities more so than reservoirs, don't intend to necessarily hold water as much as we do to hold it long enough to get it recharging. So we anticipate out of our design for our water bank about 4,500 acres of available recharge facilities to be in place ultimately when we're built out, about 90 recovery wells, 65 miles of canal, lots and lots of infrastructure, which includes those recharge facilities, and they will be ideally set up primarily for flood capture and recharge of those waters, and any available waters we might be able to pick up from other agencies around us and water purchases, et cetera. So I hope that answered your question, because on-farm flood capture generally speaks of the actual flooding of orchards and vineyards during the dormant season. Hopefully we answered that sufficiently. I think that's the last question I see. It's 5:02. We have no open questions. Oh, Phil put in there for reservoirs, not lagoon, right? So, okay, I hope that's supplemental. Anyway, that's what we've got. I think we made it, Ashley. We tried to get this all done in 1 hour's time because your time is valuable. I hope that you can, wherever you're sitting, give a big hand of appreciation for our panel today, who filled you in on some of the things that we're working on literally every day, almost 7 days a week. Lynn Groundwater will tell you that she never leaves the office. She works so hard on getting MAGSA taken care of. Ashley, again, I want to thank her for her organizing this webinar for you today. We welcome her aboard, and we look forward to all of the great communication that she will be implementing for us over the next year or so. 2022 looks very, very good. MAGSA looks very, very good. I think the Kings Basin, quite honestly, looks very, very good. So the glass is half full, and let's keep going and finish it with a flourish.